Hello and thank you for joining us on Journalist Hangout Independent Anniversary Special. I'm Ayodele Uzubakum. It's another threshold in Nigeria's checkered political history as the country celebrates its 63rd independent anniversary. Occasions like this afford the country opportunity to analyze the journey so far and the task ahead in its march to greatness. On the program today, Nigeria's political evolution, education, development, security challenges, and progress recorded in sports will form a basis of our discussion. I'll be hanging out with Babajide Kolade Otitoju, Adewale Adeye, and Adekunle Yusuf, while distinguished Nigerians from far and near will join us for the discussion. Journalists Hangout starts now. Thank you for staying with us. Since independence from Britain on the 1st of October 1960, Nigeria can be said to have come of age politically and economically. After several military interregnums, the country appears to have achieved some stability in its democratic journey. Since 1999, it has succeeded in putting the military at bay, conducting 7 successful cycles of election, leading to 24 years of uninterrupted democracy. President Bola Tinubu, who emerged the country's leader after winning the 2023 presidential election, reiterated the country's commitment to democracy and the rule of law in his independence anniversary address. Let's hear from Bola Tinubu.
Some people have said an independent Nigeria should never have come into existence. Some have said that our country will be torn apart. They are forever mistaken. Here, our nation stands, and here we shall remain. This year, we passed a significant milestone in our journey to a better Nigeria by democratically electing a 7th consecutive civilian government. Nigeria has proven that commitment to democracy and the rule of law remains our guiding light.
Alright, I have my discussants for this discussion. I'll be having Babajide Kolade Otitoju and Adewale Adeye, while Nazir Zaradin will join us from our Abuja studio, and a political historian and researcher, Muyiwa Jimoh, will join us via Zoom. Julie, let's set the ball rolling here. So far since 1960, now let's look at Nigeria's political evolution and development in the last 24 years of unbroken democratic rule.
Yes, it's been a good journey. So far, I call it a good journey because everything put together, you have to admit that we've made progress. When you compare how we started to how we are now, you will see that a lot of progress has been made politically. The First Republic failed because it was thought that the political leadership at that time did not have the experience, to deliver democratic dividends. They did not have the democratic culture because we are just coming fresh from years of colonial rule. So they didn't actually know how to manage things in a manner that will please the generality of our people, in a manner that will ensure that we had peace. So the regional government at that time was did not help us to achieve unity as a country. Starting with the census of 1962, because population figure was the main parameter used to allocate resources to the regions. It was also the means by which regions can become greater or new regions can be created. So political leaders at that time were struggling among themselves to ensure that the population figures favored them, because they knew they would derive political power as well as financial power from population growth. So as a result of that, we rigged the census of 1962 badly. Rigged in the north, rigged in the south, because this was a real contestation for power between the regions. At the end of the day, the census figures were rejected,
Unreliable.
found unreliable, and a fresh census was conducted the following year, 1963. We came up with 55 million people. That census. Out of this 55 million, 29.7 million belonged to the north, if I can use the word belong to the north. But the north retained its numerical strength over the south, but people were still not placated. The political struggles led to this split between the action group in the western region. And of course, some of its leaders were jailed. The election that was held, for the first time, we had elections solely conducted by Nigerians. I'm talking about the events leading to 1966, which led to the end of that First Republic, the fall of the First Republic. We conducted elections by ourselves solely for the first time, and it was massively rigged. Some of the people who describe the last election we had as the worst in history, they do not know some of what we've gone through, because violence and all that, especially in the south, in the western region, Awolowo and his loyalists jailed. In short, the attempt by the action group and the NCNC to maintain the status quo failed, because clearly the government at the center was also pulling the strings, ensuring that it maintained its grip. In short, the fact that the massive politicization of the regions ensured that the center could not hold. And then we eventually, the military came in. People were asking for the military. Some Nigerians wanted the military. Military took over, and that was the end of the First Republic. But if we look at what happened then, what people went through, the level of violence, that characterized election, that you can never describe it as free or fair. You will see that things have improved tremendously. Between that First Republic to the Second Republic, and then the Third Republic, we've made incremental gains in terms of our political evolution. Elections are better now. And I can say, yes, apart from a very recent past when Nigerians began saying, no, we want restructuring and all that, I think that we have done well politically. Of course, this is not saying that there is no room for improvement. There will always be room for improvement. We've made gains across the board, whether it's education, security. We've made big gains, but there is still room for improvements.
Wale, to what extent will you say democratic norm has been entrenched in the country?
Well, I think to a very large extent, we have been able to build the pillars of democracy. Whether those pillars have been able to withstand the whirlwind, the ups and downs, the tribulations, the fractures of the country, is another thing. Just like Babajide has said, we've come a very long way. When the British people came, there were independent nations. We had the Oyo Empire, we had the Benin Empire, we had the Shekiri nation that had thrived for centuries. As far back as 13th century, the Shekiri was, exchanging envoys with Portugal. Oyo Empire, had its own senate, which was called Oyomesi. It had its own army. I think as at 1800, Ibadan had no fewer than 100,000 army, with an empire that extended up to Accra, that we now call the Ga people, the Ewe people in Togo, some parts of Benin Republic. So there were the same thing with the north, the Kokora Empire and all that. So merging the people together, bringing them under one country, was a very difficult task for the British colonial powers. And this was not, they were not able to achieve this until 1914, January 1st. And when they came in, they realized that we were different. Language, culture, history. And that was why they set up a lot of constitutional conferences from 1922, Clifford Constitution, Richard State Constitution. And I think by 1954, they look at the whole system and say, look, the best way for us is to have a federal system of government. A federal system of government means that you have states and federal government sharing powers, but the states have some level of autonomy over their affairs. In terms of economy, in terms of management of resources, they have some level of autonomy. So when they were living in 1959, ahead of the 1960 independence, they went around all over the country, set up the Willis Commission to interview people in different parts of the world. That publication that was published in 1959, I still have a copy, raw copy. If you read that book, each ethnic group came up to say, look, they expressed their fears and aspirations. But they were able to tell them that, look, either we want to be Western region, Northern region, Eastern region. And at that time, each region had its own laws. There was the Western regional constitution, the Northern regional constitution, the Eastern regional constitution. And I think to a large extent that reflected a system that could have been able to, we could manage for, to be able to bring us together based on our differences. And I think for me, the major problem that confronted Nigeria was when Decree 34 was introduced in 1966 that matched all the regions by force of arms together. If you look at our development from 1952 to 1960, each region had its own ways of life. There was even nothing like NUC, for instance, that time. It was more or less in the cabinet office of the prime minister. You had control over your resources, you had control over your police, you had control over, tax. The federal government only managed a few aspects. So there was no desperation to go into the center. People were contented with managing their regions. Parliamentary system, and were able to achieve a lot. Even traditional rulers were also given specific roles to play. But I think the intervention of the military that now match diverse cultures together by force, I think that was one of the major problems that we have. But apart from that, we should also not forget that the British, when they were living, they were bent on imposing their own surrogates on Nigeria. They wanted a class of people that will represent their own interests. And that is why they were involved in so many manipulations. Some of these facts are not known until recently. If you read the book recently published by Aaron Smith, he was one of the British agents here. He exposed a lot of things that happened around that time. So the British were also fighting for their own interest. That was why when they brought in the Anglo-Nigerian defense part, the resistance was, immense, especially in the southwest. So I think in our experience in terms of building a nation, we have had so many obstacles. However, just like Babangida has said, we cannot deny the fact that we have made progress in terms of in economy, in education, in science, in communication, transportation. In 1960, if you are going from here to maybe Lokoja, probably it will take you 3 days. Or in the 1950s, you have to stop at Ibadan. If you are going to Kano, probably it will take you some 5 days. And how many airports do we have in the country at that time? So we have really made a lot of progress, even in terms of population, in terms of the prestige of the country. Now Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. So we've made a lot of progress, but I think that comparatively we could have done better if only we can address some fundamental issues, especially the structure of the Nigerian political economy that appears to stifle creativity and the potentials of the different nations that have been forced to live together, not necessarily out of their own way.
Let me go over to the Abuja studio, Mr. Zaradin. What sort of political leaders have emerged compared to the First and Second Republic?
Well, I think that is where we have the problem. And the problem started with godfatherism in politics. I think in the First Republic, yes, there were leaders like Sir Ahmadu Bello, Sardauna Sokoto, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. But you could not at that time call them godfathers as such, because they left people who had merit. Meritocracy was the order of the day. And they gave every part of society the chance to grow. I remember Maitama Sule and later Shehu Shagari were the youngest ministers at the age of 25 and 26 at that time. And you can see the yearnings and aspirations of young men today in Nigeria that they have not been taken care of. But at that time, because of the foresight of the leaders, although I can even say the oldest person in that generation of leaders was Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was only 42 or 46 at that time. So you can see that it was the leaders were young men, and most of them, after the coup, did not even acquire anything. I remember the house of Tafawa Balewa or the house of Sardauna Sokoto or Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. They didn't, their children did not inherit anything from their fathers. Not like now, when you see leaders have oil wells, they have series of jets and a lot of wealth around them. So I think that is where we lost it. But I still want to ally with my friend Jide Otitoju that in spite of all the problems, in spite of the agitation going on, because these agitations are going on by various sections of society because they want to have a bite of the cake. Not only bite of the cake, but to control the cake so that they share it to others. Despite all that, I believe that we will continue to be one indivisible, indissoluble, and inextinguishable political entity till the end of time. We look at Nigeria when we got our independence in 1960. We were nearly 45 million, and today we are 225 million, which is the total number of, I believe, the population of United Kingdom, France, and Germany put together. This is the population of Nigeria today. It is also 1.5 times the population of Francophone West Africa, the 9 countries in Francophone West Africa that have, well, virtually about 150 million people today. So much progress has been made, no doubt. But more can be done. And I believe the rude intervention of the military was one of the causes of the problems. Maybe if they had not intervened in 1966, by now our parliamentary system would have developed, and all these wastes in the system would have been checked very well.
All right.